Hi there, and welcome on the journey to transform culture. I'm Steve, and I'll be your guide. Well, folks, I hope you're having a fantastic day and an even better week. Folks, in this video, we're going to talk a little bit about the comfort zone. Okay. And as I often do, and the discussions typically go, we talk about organizational culture and then, of course, much of these things apply, the data points, the dots connect as they ripple outward toward other organizations or groups we're involved with in our communities and churches and family and friend groups and all of it, right? Anywhere where there's a few of us, right? But typically, organizations is where we congregate as teams. So that's kind of where we jump in typically. That isn't to say we always do, but for the most part, that's the hub, right? That we dive into. So, I know, right? The comfort zone. You're like thinking, okay, where are we going with this? Well, the interesting thing about the comfort zone is there's so many aspects of it that that the tributaries of the subject can go off in so many different directions. But they do, it does connect to so many of the other videos. Because of that, that'll help alleviate us going into all of the other topics. But when you think of comfort zone, what do you mostly think of being in a comfort zone? If you're talking about work, you're talking about predictable environment, right? I mean, that's probably the simplest way to define it, right? A predictable environment. People work their entire lives so that in the latter stages of life, they don't have unpredictability, that there's predictability enough to where they can, perhaps enjoy that, right? But that's a known comfort zone. And even in our day-to-day life, similarly, people work, to accumulate and to build their lives and all these things in a constant and continuous I guess you could say like a bird, bringing back sticks to the nest and doing all the things, right? Constantly maintaining and ensuring that comfort zone is maintained, right? And we see this in culture, we see this in communities, and we see it in organizations too, right? There's really not any difference between all of these groups and how we do this. We do it. But the difficult thing about a comfort zone isn't the stability aspect of it, although that can be a slippery slope too if you let it. It's really about becoming complacent, right? And the reason why I didn't call this video, complacency, is because complacency is what comes from being in your comfort zone too long, right? I remember when I was first in the Air Force and I would be gone, and I would take leave, depending on where I was at what part of my career. I would take leave and come home for 3 or 4 weeks. I'd take a whole bunch of leave, time off, all at once, and visit with family and friends and whatever when I was younger, and did all that, right? And what I noticed was I would come back and really nothing really changed, right? It was kind of the same thing. People really hadn't done much different. It was a little like Groundhog Day, right? And I had a friend remark to me once, "Boy, I wouldn't want your life," And I thought to myself, well, I kind of like the adventure of my life, right? I like the adventure of not being always in a comfort zone. It doesn't mean that I'm looking to be uncomfortable. I mean, who's really doing that, right? Life will just deal you uncomfortable cards when when it sees fit, and it's up to us to take those cards, land on the floor, and to build something with those, right? But it's being in those, we'll say being, we'll say avoiding complacency, right? Because if you're in a comfort zone, you're more apt to be complacent, right? You're more apt to not challenge yourself. You're more apt to coast. Your relationships tend to be, people, get taken for granted, all these things, right? And we see where rifts in friendships, families, all these things happen, right? and there's ebbs and flows to those things, and there's healings that do occur, but for the most part, like a garden, if you're not actively tending it, right? If you're not actively in some process, even in the resting times, like right now as I video doing this video, it's winter time, right? So what is winter time? It is it's basically it's a seasonal cycle, right? We're in seasonal cycle, and wintertime typically is that end of harvest, and then it's the kind of this slumber, right? And then kind of think of like bears slumbering in their caves or wherever they hang out, and then until spring, and then boom, things blossom and grow, and things are moving again, right? So even the seasons aren't complacent. Even with the seasons, there isn't a comfort zone, right? But in our working world, there really isn't much delineation between, Monday through Friday. I mean, we do know the difference, but there isn't really much delineation between Monday through Friday, this month, the next, this quarter, the next quarter, the first 2 quarters, the last 2 quarters. I mean, it can become what? It can become predictable, and we can become complacent. And that complacency then does what? It bores us. Sorry to say it, folks. When you're complacent, you get bored. And when you get bored, you take your eye off the ball. When you take your eye off the ball, quality suffers, productivity drops, all the things with key performance indicators, right? Just as if you take your hands off the garden of the relationships in your life, those things will what? Wither. So will product and service, right? In an organization. It's no different in our own personal life as it is in our professional lives, right? If you aren't challenging yourself or growing and learning, one of the fantastic things about the internet and all these things is you can learn so much constantly if you choose to, right? You can only watch so many cat videos, right? And don't get me wrong, those are fun. I know this is a complete tangent, but these cat videos that popped up in a reel or something. This cat was just whapping the heck out of a dog or whatever it was, or another cat. and then like the mama dog walked around the corner. I think it was a puppy, and looked, and the cat was like, "Uh-oh, busted." I didn't think that was clever, but we can only be entertained, right? A little levity, a little dopamine hit of that, pretty harmless. But we can't live on that, right? That's cotton candy. We can't live on cotton candy. Love cotton candy. Can't live on cotton candy, right? Until they learn how to make it protein cotton candy. But that's the thing, folks, is that we can become complacent, and sometimes we need a little bit of that cotton candy. Now, that's the difference between codependent behaviors, right, and addictions. I've seen this too, where people become complacent, right? They become bored with their lives, and what? They get, the alcohol, the drugs, the this, the that. They get into things, and look, anybody, addiction is a difficult thing, and those addictions aren't just relegated to alcohol and drugs. They could be relegated to anything. It could be food, right? It could be anything where you're just going to that to numb your mind, right? Too much TV, too many, who hasn't been caught up in a show they really like? I know I have, right? There's a dopamine hit, right? Want to see how it turns out, want to follow the characters, become invested, right? So that's the other thing, you become invested. Because what? You're actually watching something where there isn't predictability from a predictable place, right? So there is that, the characters aren't in a comfort zone, but you are. And so you're really living vicariously through fictional characters. Your life is literally being, stolen by fiction, right? Now, it's okay, we have variety in life, and that's fine, but we can, like anything, can become a distraction and an addiction, right? And we have to be careful of that, right? Because those things aren't healthy ways of being when it comes to getting out of a comfort zone, right? Those aren't doing us any good. Focusing on the things that do make sense, our health, our safety, our security, our knowledge, building our intellect, right? Building our relationships, maybe going on a trip, an adventure, being cultured, right? Within the community, or going on a trip or vacation, all these things, right? So there are other healthy things we can do, but the other tough part about this is economics too, right? So many people are held over the bucket of economics to where what are they left with? And this is the tough part about struggling people who struggle financially is that what it's difficult. You say, well, comfort zone. It's not. They're people who are disadvantaged or struggling in those areas. There is not a comfort zone. They are in a constant um, uncomfortable zone. Okay, they're some of them are in fight or flight. Others are, they've got forms of PTSD and other things that are plaguing them because of the austere life that they're having to burden right now as you watch this video, right? So, and so many people out in the workforce, right? They're not in a comfort zone, right? They're not in a comfort zone. They come to work, they're probably in an exhausted zone, right? So they come to work, and for some, their work, for some, going to school, that's their comfort zone because they can focus on something productive, right? Instead of their troubles, right? Whether they be health, financial, all the things, right? So, so it's important to remember that there is a distinction between people who are not living lives of comfort, right? Who find solace in the predictable systems that we make for organizations and our communities and all of that, right? And there are those who are in a comfortable situation who what? Who then can become complacent, right? Now, if you get the second group to help the first group, work out situations and help solve problems, then guess what? Now you have a growing, thriving community. But instead, we get distracted by all the isms, right? We get distracted by all the dopamine hitting things, and we don't what? We're not really loving our neighbor. We're not really taking care of our communities probably the way we should, right? We just aren't, and there isn't me pointing fingers at anybody. It's all of us, folks. We're all in one bucket, right? So the thing to keep in mind about being in your comfort zone, it's a tricky deal, right? Sometimes it'll sneak up on you and you're in your comfort zone. You know how you can tell, somebody's in their comfort zone? They're walking around poking people and, provoking them, right? They're provoking them. They're bored, so they're going around poking other people. They're in their comfort zone and they haven't even realized it. These people who are provoking other people don't realize they're in their comfort zone. The solution is they need to get out of their comfort zone and go do something. Who hasn't had a supervisor or somebody of that sort come around and is pestering the workforce, right? Being nitpicky and naggy about something, this or that, micromanaging where it really is unnecessary to do so. Just throwing an extra layer of nonsense on top of, what should be a productive day. Who hasn't had that thought? I've seen it occur from the workforce, and I've heard plenty of people tell me how this occurs. And running through the people in the workforce in their mind, they're basically like, go do something, go do something productive. Quit bothering us, okay? We're fine. We're doing our job. We got this handled. We don't need you pestering and poking and prodding and doing all the things, right? And but what? Some of these people, they get bored. And why are they bored? Because they're not challenging themselves in the proper way. This is a slippery slope too if you're a leader or all the way up to the leader in an organization, is that if you become complacent and if you're not looking out and being a good steward to take care of your folks on your team, then you're going to become bored, right? You're going to become bored. And now instead of helping them, you're going to be, you're going to be part of the problem, right? So avoid that. Recognize in yourself that if you're going out there poking people, right? It doesn't matter if we're talking about organizations or otherwise. If you're out there poking people, hey, let people figure it out, right? You have your life to address the issues you have to address and overcome what you need to overcome. The last thing you need is somebody else on your shoulders, going, why don't you this and why don't you that and why don't you this? The last thing you need is a nitpicker or a nagger, okay? You don't need anybody nagging on you while you're trying to overcome the challenges in your life. And this is how you know you're not in a comfort zone, is if you see people coming to do these things. You can tell right away, no, I'm not in a comfort zone, because you wouldn't be here bothering me if I if I was. So anyway, just wanted to touch a little bit upon being in your comfort zone, how complacency can sneak in there, right? And what you might think is security and safety and predictability, which isn't always a bad thing, right? That can be a good thing, can become complacency. And when complacency comes, quality suffers, right? So does productivity. And next thing you know, big layoffs are coming. You get all these, negative results. So complacency has a large cost. Not only that is you may be putting your customers in mortal danger, and that's not a good thing either, right? So that's a terrible thing. So this is why complacency is difficult, right? It's just like driving down the road, right? It's for the longest time, as long as I've been alive, you haven't been able to be drunk and drive, yet it still occurs, right? Because people are complacent and they aren't thinking about other people, right? So make sure that don't get complacent. Be stable, work for stability and work for predictability and all those things. But if you start to get too comfortable and too complacent, that's where you need to challenge yourself, right? That's where you need to challenge yourself. But do you need to tell other people that you challenge yourself? No. Your life is your life. Live your life. But beware, right? Because otherwise things will sneak up on you. While you might be working to try to make your last part of your life the best it can be, if you become complacent along that journey, then the rug can get pulled out from underneath you. It could be choices along that path. You become complacent at any point along this journey, it's gonna sneak up on you, and you have to be careful about that. All right, folks, that'll be enough for today. Hope you're doing well. Remember, hit that good green domino 3 to 5 times a day to uplift, motivate, inspire, and just encourage one another. When you do this, not only hoping to transform culture, but you're transforming your own life. But remember, you can't transform anything on the outside unless you're willing to transform on the inside. Super important. All right, folks, have a fantastic day. Hit like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, we'll talk to you later.